Hello everyone, it's very nice to see you again at the Street Art Conference of the Street Art Festival Ljubljana this year. Again, we are in Kino Šiška. It's great to see you in such great numbers. Well, I believe some of you will also wake up during the day and join us also live. I also welcome everyone that are watching us online. In case if you have any questions, please write them in the comments and we will put them out to the presenters at the end of their panels. So you are very welcome to also ask questions, of course. This year, the festival is focusing on sustainability. And I could say that we touched the sustainability briefly already on the last year's conference. If you remember the panel about the underwater graffiti, because the graffiti were painted with sustainable colors, since we are talking about graffiti painted on wagons, train wagons that were somehow deposited in the ocean. Well, this year we are focusing much more on sustainability. We will be here with you up until 4 o'clock. A lot of different panels will be presented, so I hope you stay with us during the whole day. But first, I would like to invite, proudly, I would like to say that Dr. Erik Ušić is going to give us a short welcome. Erik.
Thank you. For this introduction, what can I say? I will be quite brief. I even wrote a text, but I don't think that I will read everything that I wrote. This is only a frame to not improvise too much, because when I start to improvise, it's maybe not good for the audience. So what can I say? Last year, as it was mentioned in the introduction, we focused the street art conference on the concept of periphery. So periphery of street art and street art on the periphery, and actually anticipated, as you said, this year symposium that will open and explore a quite complex, I would say, topic and a relevant field for contemporary society and communities. Today, a symposium will examine various aspects of sustainability, and will address some crucial questions about the changes, transformation, challenges of the current environment, ecological and climate situation, and its effects on society, as well as the relation between the mentioned field and street art. So the concept of sustainability, that is of course a complex and multi-layered, not only concept, but social and ecological problematic, is let's say the starting point and the incentive for our reflections and discussions today. One of the central questions that is a sort of guideline or a leitmotif for this year meeting is the question: how, if at all, can street art contribute to various forms of sustainability in both urban and non-urban environments. Furthermore, some of the papers and presentations will also address how sustainability stimulate the interactions between street artists, street art as a field, researchers, consumers, and so on. But also it will explore how street art and street artists tackle some of the most crucial issues of the contemporary world, and how art articulates the issue of sustainability. And in that sense, the symposium will cover a broad set of topics, from technology to economical sustainability, human-animal relations, social regeneration, cultural development, of course, political activism, and other more or less complex fields and topics, as different cultural projects, practices, and particular artistic interventions in localized contexts and communities. the end, what can I say? From last year, Symposium, we are still working on a special issue of Urban Creativity Journal with the topic of periphery of street art and street art on the periphery. And I'm saying this because the next year, after we finish this meeting, we will also work on a new special issue on the Urban Creativity Journal with the topic and papers from this year meeting here on the Street Art Festival in Ljubljana. But I think that we will be in touch in the future. And that's it from my part. I would like to welcome you all to the Street Art Festival, to Ljubljana, of course. I mean, I'm not from Ljubljana. How can I say welcome to Ljubljana, even if I arrived just 1 hour ago? And thanks to Kino Šiška and to the organization, to the members of the organization of the Street Art Festival, and especially to my friend Sandy, who is organizing the festival 4 or 5 years in a row, and it's keeping it real. That's it. Enjoy.
Erik, thank you very much. Now it's time for the first panel of the day, called Thoughts on Street Art and the Environment. We're going to start with our guest from Denmark, who you can already see at the big screen. Hello, Peter.
Hello.
His work has been actually covered by television and newspapers all over Europe, so you might have read or seen something about what he does, especially because his work was written about in Le Monde Diplomatique, The Observer, The Guardian, Der Spiegel, and many others. So let us welcome investigative reporter and historian of ideas, Peter Bengtsen. Hello.
Hello. I think you got the wrong Peter Bengtsen, I have to say. I'm an art historian. There's another guy from Denmark who's called Peter Bengtsen.
Oh, I'm so sorry for this mistake. So let us welcome art historian Peter Bengtsen.
No problem at all. Let me just see if I can share my screen here. Let me see here. Are you seeing my screen now? Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, excellent. Great. So first of all, thank you for inviting me back. I spoke here remotely in 2021 as well. At the time, I wasn't able to come to Ljubljana myself because my first daughter was about to be born, and this year is much the same. My second daughter is about to be born at any minute, so I'm not able to travel anywhere. And if you see me rush out all of a sudden, then it's because the birth starts. But hopefully that won't happen just yet. So my name is Peter Bengtsen, and I have a background in art history and visual studies as well as sociology. And I'm an associate professor of art history and visual studies at Lund University, where I teach and I also do research. I've been writing about street art and graffiti since 2006, and I published my first book called The Street Art World in 2014. And can somebody just confirm that you can see that book on screen now? I just want to make sure that the screen sharing works properly.
Well, at the moment we see the first dias, Thoughts on Street Art and the Environment, and 2 books on it. Is that okay? Yes.
Yeah, that's great. So you can see the street art world and street art and the environment.
Yes.
Okay, excellent, great. So,
but it's not on presentation mode.
It's not on presentation mode? Okay, let me just try again here.
If you try full screen, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I have done. Just a second. I'll just stop sharing and I'll just try it again here. Is it full screen now?
No.
Okay. Just 1 second. I'll just open it up again here. Okay. Is it full screen now?
No, what if you tried the view on your up left side and try full screen there?
You mean in PowerPoint, or do you mean
In PowerPoint, yes.
Yeah. The problem is I can't really see the menu as long as I'm screen sharing. 1 second here.
Well, maybe you can just show us the next slide. If you click on it, maybe we can see it like that.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just see here. Yeah, I suppose we can do it like that. Let me just go back here. Okay. Yeah, we'll just watch it like that, then that's fine. So, as I said, I've been writing about graffiti and street art since 2006.
Okay, at the moment, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. At the moment, we don't see anything at all, so maybe if you...
I'm so sorry. I'm not sharing. Just a second. Are you seeing it now?
Yes, now we do.
Okay, great. Then we'll do it like this. As I said, I've been writing about street art and graffiti since 2006, and I published my first book called The Street Art World in 2014, which you should be seeing on the screen now. And then in 2018, I published my second book, Street Art and the Environment, in which I consider how street art can work as a potential agent of environmental change. As the years have passed and the environmental issues that we face have worsened, more and more people have shown interest in this work on street art and the environment. And so I'm very happy to have been invited to talk about street art and environmental issues here today. In recent decades, environmental issues like climate change and unsustainable resource consumption have climbed up the political agenda. Scientific reports, media coverage, information campaigns, and documentaries are some of the channels that are available for transmitting facts on these topics to the public. A problem, however, is the increasing fast-paced and fragmented mediascape in which scientific findings are shared. Information overload makes it impossible to take everything in and increasingly difficult to distinguish facts from falsehood. The effort required to access and verify constant flows of information can lead to some people becoming overwhelmed. They may stop trying to determine what the facts are and instead side with the claims they feel most comfortable believing, which will often be the ones that confirm the viability of the choices that they have already made. One of the main theses in street art and the environment is that art can be an efficient and effective means of conveying environmental challenges to the public. It can influence people in more subtle ways than facts and scientific projections of future scenarios, by addressing in an engaging manner attitudes and lifestyles, as well as societal, existential, and ethical values. These underpin our decisions and actions in everyday life, and as such, art has the potential to play a role in changing how we think about and act towards nature and the environment. My position is that all types of art can influence our thinking regarding the environment and the ecosystems that we are a part of. However, I see street art as a particular agent of possible change. Since it's an integral part of the urban setting, street art can create surprising shifts in our perspective on that context and our practices within it. This may open up a space for reflection and foster increased environmental awareness and changes in behavior. In street art and the environment, I substantiate this argument by discussing several environment-themed artworks. I'll obviously not be able to go through the whole book in this presentation, but I'll present a few of the cases that are included in the book and some of the points that can be made in relation to each of those cases. The first case presented in the book is this relatively well-known intervention by Alexander Orion in a traffic tunnel in Sao Paulo. The intervention involved so-called clean graffiti or reverse graffiti. Rather than applying paint, this practice involves removing dirt from a surface. Orion went into the Max Pfeffer tunnel in Sao Paulo, and using a piece of cloth, he began to selectively clean exhaust residue from the walls. In doing so, he created a grouping of skulls that visually referenced the contents of an ossuary, which is to say a place or a container for storing bones. By partially removing the soot, or the exhaust residue, Orion called attention to the high concentrations of air pollutants in the city, especially those emitted by motor vehicles. The work's impact was heightened by using exhaust residue already lining the walls as an artistic medium. The problem with the city's air quality was further emphasized by the artist's choice of skulls as his subject matter, which of course relates to death. The case of Osario demonstrates that it's possible to create with relatively small means a striking visual expression that addresses serious societal and environmental concerns. The reaction to Orion's intervention is also testimony to the perceived effectiveness of the artwork to highlight an environmental problem in the city. Municipal cleaners soon came to wash away the skulls created by the artist. No charges were brought against Orion for this intervention. He was not charged by the police. And he has since done more of these works, both in this and other tunnels in Sao Paulo. These are interventions that may create wonder and amazement in the passerby, and possibly embarrassment to authorities as the works make visible the pollutants that we breathe as a result of fossil-fueled transportation. This visualization and the feelings that it creates could potentially work as a step towards change. Just like Orion used the existing soot on the walls of a tunnel, a lot of street art involves altering different existing elements of urban infrastructure. This is an example from Lund in Sweden, where I work, where an artist group called Ethical Vandalism has etched a motif into a traffic sign. The etched image depicts 3 human figures with spears. One of them is standing on top of an overturned car, while the others are on either side of the car. The 2 figures have raised their spears over their heads, and each of them is lifting one foot as if doing a celebratory dance. The 3rd figure, the one on the right, seems to be triumphantly raising one arm. The image is reminiscent of hunting scenes in prehistoric cave drawings, with the car taking the place of a slain animal. This connotation is strengthened by the simple style of the image, including the rough outlines for clothing which recall rudimentary fur garments. The hunting scene can be interpreted as a critical comment on escalating car use, the continued human consumption of fossil fuels, and the resulting emissions of pollutants, including carbon dioxide, which has been linked to anthropogenic, which is to say human-made, climate change. The artist's environmental agenda is more explicitly evident in this stencil painting. Here the car image is absent. Instead, pictograms in a speech bubble link the extraction of fossil fuels, the extraction here represented by an oil pump jack, to CO2 emissions and death. The second speech bubble, which reads as a response to the first, indicates cursing through a cloud and a thunderbolt, as well as a skull and crossbone symbol, and a willingness to stand in opposition, represented by a clenched fist symbol. The anger expressed in the second speech bubble is also manifest in the speaker seemingly breaking their spear over their knee. Another case from the book is this installation, which is part of an ongoing project called Cement Eclipses by the Spanish artist Isa Cordal. Since 2006, Gordal has been placing small sculptures of human beings in public space. These often balding and brief-carrying men in suits are either painted in drab colors or left in the gray tones of the raw material that they're made from. This work also incorporates an existing element of the urban environment, just like the three previous works I showed. In this case, not a permanent piece of street furniture, but rather a water puddle. Due to the design and the scale of the sculptures, some of them have been cut off at the chest, some of them have been cut off at the top of the head, as you can see, so that they're submerged to varying degrees. So this design and also the scale of the sculptures makes the puddle perceptibly transformed into a larger and deeper body of water than it really is. And thereby the artist plays into the idea of the flooded urban environment. This use of perspective, where you have small details against a wider surrounding, is an important part of the work. Gordal, like many other artists doing work in the street, is aware that photographic documentation and online distribution prolongs an artwork's lifespan beyond its real-world physical existence. The image of this installation was first posted by Gordal on Flickr in 2011 with the caption "Electoral Campaign." So "Electoral Campaign" was ostensibly the title of this work. However, the image of the artwork only went viral after it was combined in 2014, so 3 years later, with the title "Politicians Discussing Global Warming," and was posted on Twitter rather than on Flickr, where of course it's much easier to share the image and to comment and to like and so on. The combination of words and photograph made for a Twitter post with a compelling narrative that many people liked and shared. The overt environment-themed title on Twitter seems to have been added by someone other than the artist. So it wasn't Gordal who created this title. It was presumably Nigel Brito who made the post on Twitter, as you can see in the present slide. This case demonstrates that an artwork's potential to create online engagement doesn't depend solely on its original expression. Modifications and thematic recontextualizations by others who share the work may also be decisive in whether it has a certain impact on the viewer. It's worth noting that while artists often see the creative engagement of users as something positive, it can be damaging as well. For instance, after Matt Fury's Pepe the Frog was co-opted by the so-called alt-right in the US, the comic character became viewed as a hate symbol, to such an extent that Fury felt the need to symbolically kill it off. So in that case of co-option, the creator did not find the result to be positive, and actually it had very adverse effects for his creation. But in the case of Gordal, you can say that the work had a much bigger impact than it originally did because somebody decided to recontextualize it on Twitter. As with many street works, it's interesting to consider the interplay between Gordal's sculptures and the context of the urban landscape. For example, in several of his installations, like the one depicted here, Gordal seems to problematize in a very literal way human estrangement from nature and the limited space that nature is afforded in the city. In his artworks, there's often an air of nostalgia and even romanticism in relation to nature. Here we see two archetypical businessmen, or perhaps politicians, kneeling in front of a plant that has pushed through the tarmac of its own accord. In this artwork, much like with the puddle in the previous example, perspective plays an important role. The scale of the human figures draw attention to small elements of nature in the city that we might otherwise overlook. Within the dichotomy nature-culture, the city is often conceptualized as pure culture. Street art works that highlight urban public space and by extension the world as not just host to a community of human beings, but to a wider biotic community that includes many non-human members, gain from being embedded in that space rather than being embedded in the context of the traditional white cube of the gallery or the museum. It's significant that these artworks point to actual plant life rather than pointing merely to artificial representations of plant life. And this becomes clear when comparing the street work that is depicted in this slide to a similar sculpture by Gordal in a gallery setting. The difference partly comes down to material properties, like the use of synthetic grass arranged by the artist in this gallery work, rather than real grass that is pushing through the tarmac of a street by itself without anyone prompting it to do so and without anyone controlling it. From this comparison, it's quite clear that the context of urban public space adds meaning to works that are placed there. But the comparison also highlights the previously mentioned importance of the use of perspective. In the street, Gordal's combination of miniature sculptures and large spaces of the city creates a visual shift. A shift that enables people to suddenly see themselves and the culture that they're part of from a new point of view. This is an experience that partly stems from seeing the artworks in relation to pre-existing elements of the urban environment, rather than as artificial constructs in a gallery setting. The merging of the micro perspective of the sculptures and the macro perspective of the city creates at once an affinity to and an alienation from the everyday surroundings and opens a space for reflection. In virtue of the visual interruptions that the artworks in the street create, we may begin to notice, not only notice, but also consider our relation to elements of the city that we previously overlooked. Street artworks, then, can pull us out of our everyday routine and cause us to pay closer attention to our surroundings, including to animal and plant life in the city. In my work on environmental street art, I look at smaller interventions like the ones we've seen so far, as well as larger ones. And one might say that the latter are not strictly speaking street art, but rather street art related works. And one example is by the Portuguese artist Bordalo, who has gone from creating smaller sized unauthorized interventions to making larger, often sanctioned artworks. With a background in Lisbon's graffiti culture, Bordalo has become well known for his trash assemblages in the form of different animals. One such work is a raccoon constructed from various plastic objects affixed to a wall in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 2017. The top part of the assemblage has been left in the original bright colors of the plastic that was used to create the image, while the bottom part has been painted to more closely resemble a raccoon. The piece was created in collaboration with Scrap the Trap, a local project working against a municipal program to trap and kill raccoons, as well as other species of wildlife listed as having a high risk of carrying rabies. Scrap the Trap, previously operating under the name Humane Options, were previously operating under the name Humane Options Pittsburgh. When they changed their name, they also decided to use a more visual approach to their activism. As a representative of Scrap the Trap wrote to me in an email while I was working on my book, we decided to start afresh with Scrap the Trap and to launch a very upbeat and visual campaign from the start, totally targeted on the city trapping issue. A lot of the arguments against trapping can be kind of long and technical, rooted in wildlife biology, and we live in a Twitter world where people want brief messaging and very visual input. So we felt that the new campaign needed to be upbeat and capture people's imagination. So Scrap the Trap determined that in the fast-paced contemporary mediascape, an image-based campaign would be more effective at reaching a wide audience than communicating through facts and figures and complex narratives. The considerations expressed in the email parallel and arguably corroborate a central thesis in my book, The Street Art and the Environment. And that is that art, by creating emotional responses, has the power to engage people with issues that can otherwise be difficult to grasp and relate to. This engagement may in turn lead to behavioral changes. The idea that creativity can be used to raise environmental awareness in a different way than facts and statistics is also highlighted by Lithuanian artist Ernest Sakarevich's project Splash and Burn in Indonesia. The project describes itself as an awareness campaign responding creatively to unregulated farming practices of palm oil in Indonesia. It incorporates murals and sculptures and interventions that have been appearing in cities and the vast natural landscape of Sumatra. On the 22nd of July 2017, Splash and Burn's Instagram account reposted a segment produced by the BBC. The video shows artworks made for the project interspersed with footage of palm oil presses and burning forest areas. The imagery is overlaid with explanatory text, including transcribed excerpts from an interview with Sakarevich, which are also audible. Sakarevich makes statements about communicating the issue of unsustainable palm oil production through creative means rather than facts and figures. This again reflects the idea that art can engage viewers on an emotional rather than a primarily intellectual level. This notion is partially corroborated in another Instagram user's response to Splash and Burn's video repost on Instagram. And that response is shown here. And this user writes, "Great coverage from BBC. Really brings the project together. I understand much better now what the project is trying to achieve. Love the use of creativity rather than statistics to highlight issues." The last part of the quote reiterates how creativity rather than statistics can be used to highlight issues. The first half of the author's comment, however, explains that they have a better understanding of the project's objectives after watching the footage. This suggests that the artworks are in themselves perhaps not always enough to convey the relevant issues fully and effectively, and that they may need to be complemented by verbal contextualization. As with the Cordal case presented earlier, we see here that social media enable communication where such contextualization can take place. Captions and other forms of added context may make it easier to read artworks as environment themed. And this could mean that experiencing environment-themed artworks on social media could potentially have a bigger impact than seeing them in person. With their various uses of figuration, humor, and existing elements of the urban environment, the artworks that I've discussed so far to some extent adhere to established aesthetic and/or material norms that are associated with expressions that are commonly categorized as art. But of course, there are also creations found in urban public space that work in a more confrontational manner. One example is this piece of graffiti painted in Malmö, in Sweden, where I live, on an ad kiosk housing an advertisement for Arla Foods organic milk. The original advert features a photograph of a woman in a green pasture. At the bottom right corner, an accompanying text explains her name is Veronica and that she's one of 400 organic milk farmers that work with Arla Foods in Sweden. The top half of the advertisement photograph is overlaid with the following larger text, which I've translated from the original Swedish. The text reads, The additional benefits of organic milk are not seen on the packaging, but here on the farm. With the quotation marks and the word here suggesting a specific farm, this reads as a statement from the woman in the photo. It seems like a soundbite from perhaps an interview with this person. This, along with the advertising campaign more broadly, may allude to the better welfare of cows and also humans that live on organic farms compared to those in the conventional milk production system. Even though the advertisement advocated for consumption of organic milk, it was still open to criticism from animal rights activists. This is evident from the message, "Fuck you, animal abuser," that was spray painted in black on the ad kiosk, as you can see. The graffiti mimicked the personal tone of the advert by directly addressing the depicted woman or perhaps Arla Foods. This unsanctioned message could be read as a critique from a more radical, ecocentric standpoint than the one held by organic milk farmers. An activist position that deems abusive any industry using animals for production. The graffiti pointed out that even milk advertised as organic is the product of an industry which prizes cows for their ability to produce milk rather than for their intrinsic value as living beings. Although some might see this as a valid critique, the confrontational language and the crude use of spray paint as a medium may have stood in the way of getting this message across to a wide viewership in a persuasive manner. The aggressive tone and messy application of spray paint, which might appeal to members of a smaller activist community, could cause a wider audience to disregard the expression as mere vandalism and thereby miss the underlying message entirely. As with so many things, this is of course a matter of degrees. Here's another example of a somewhat confrontational graffiti expression from Lisbon. The application of paint here is still quite crude, but the choice of color as well as the heart makes the expression come across as somewhat less abrasive, somewhat less aggressive than the intervention in Malmö. Also, this graffiti does not come across as an attack on an existing expression. It's not put on top of an existing advertisement or anything like that. It's just on a wall. Of course, the owner of the wall might still find it problematic. But it's not a direct attack on a pre-existing expression. Further, the message can be seen as less confrontational and perhaps even humorous. The expression reads "come sano, come coño vegano," and then two exclamation marks and a heart. And for those who don't speak Spanish, it translates to "eat healthy, eat vegan pussy," and then a heart. While some would probably still deem this offensive both for language use and for aesthetic reasons, the expression, at least for me, comes across as more palatable, as more engaging than the example from Malmö. And I believe that it may be more successful in reaching a wider audience. There are many more things that can be said about the artworks shown in this presentation. Further, the examples that I've shown now is just a small selection of the environmental street artworks discussed in my book. For instance, I could have included in this presentation some of the much larger endeavors, like this reforestation project by the Spanish artist Esif. However, I thought it would be good to leave a bit of time for comments and for questions. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to briefly sum up some of the main points of this presentation, and then we can go into a discussion or a Q&A. So one of the main theses in street art and the environment is that visual art can capture the imagination of viewers and create engagement in more subtle but profound ways than factual information and scientific projections of future scenarios, which are often ignored. When we have articles that in complicated ways try to lay out the facts of climate change, it's very easy for people to disengage with that content. It can be very difficult to grasp. And so they might just, as I said in the beginning of the presentation, they might just disregard it completely and just choose to believe whatever they want to believe. And this is, of course, a problem if you want to foster some kind of change in people's behavior. Through its ability to influence the values that inform our daily decisions, art may have a role to play in altering how we think about and act towards nature and the environment, precisely because it engages us not primarily perhaps on an intellectual level, but rather on an emotional or an instinctive level. Street art, I find, is a potentially powerful agent of change due to it being embedded in the everyday context of urban public space. Unexpected encounters with perceived unsanctioned ephemeral artworks can disrupt routines. It can open a space for reflection and foster increased environmental awareness and adjustments in behavior. At the same time, the spreading of artworks through social media may be an effective and efficient way of promoting environmental awareness, in part because of the extra verbal or written contextualization that can be achieved through these media channels. So we may be able to explain some of the thoughts behind the artworks, which can help people to understand in a more precise way what it is that we want to achieve with the work. However, it should be noted that social media applications are also full of other distracting content, and that this may reduce the impact of the artworks that are experienced there. So if you're scrolling on Instagram, for example, and you see an environment-themed artwork, if that is framed on either side by people doing makeup tutorials and cooking recipes, it might have a tendency to drown out or to sort of level, put all the different expressions at the same level of importance, and then all of a sudden you have a situation where environmental themed artworks are at the same level as a makeup tutorial, which may cause people to not engage with the actual important issue in the same way that they might otherwise have if it wasn't framed in that way on social media. So while you can reach a larger audience potentially on social media, there are also I would say significant drawbacks to presenting work in that context. And here it might be more effective to see works on the street. But of course, that requires people to geographically be placed where the works are in order to see them like that. So while there are many challenges to effectively furthering an environmental agenda, the cases that have been discussed in this presentation and in my book demonstrate that art may be a useful complement to factual information about complex environmental issues. Engaging viewers also on an emotional level, instead of relying solely upon reasoning and facts, may be a powerful catalyst for shifting attitudes. Images, artworks, have the capacity to instill empathy and problematize anthropocentric attitude towards non-human members of the biotic community like animals and plants. They offer new perspectives on the relationships between humans and the environment. And in this way, art can help change the world by promoting environmental awareness. And with that, I'm going to wrap up the presentation itself, and I would like to invite anyone who has comments or questions to please voice them.
So any questions in the audience, maybe?
Thank you for this very informative, insightful, and aesthetically very rich presentation. I have a question from the terminological point of view. You used the word street furniture when you were talking about Cordal. This is a very interesting wording. Can you please explain? Do you elaborate more expressions like this? Because they're very informative, useful.
Sure. So when I was talking about Cordal in relation to the puddle that we see here, I was talking about how he's not using street furniture in this particular intervention. And an example of street furniture is a sign, for instance, or a bench, or a trash can. You know, any sort of element that exists in the urban environment that is put there and serves a function, you can label as street furniture. And very often, artworks will be adhered to or etched into or in some other ways engage with the existing urban furniture, street furniture. So that's what I mean when I say street furniture. Another example is what we see here, and advertisement box or kiosk, as they're called. That's also a piece of street furniture. So that's what I mean by it. It's not particularly profound, but thank you for the question. It's of course important to clarify that.
Any other questions?
Hi, it's not a question, it's more a comment. I don't remember if you, Peter, mentioned that in the book, but in the photograph of the ethic vandalism, can you go back to that, to the street sign?
Which one? The first or the second?
That one, yeah.
This one?
Yeah, the picture, I think that photograph is very powerful because not only, I mean, there is a comment about the car upside down, but also the bus behind in the background is going to the airport.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you mentioned that in the book or not. But I just realized today, seeing that in like large scale.
Exactly. I realized that when I was preparing this presentation. I don't mention it in the book. And this is, of course, this is not the only photo I took of that work, but I chose this one for the book. And I maybe subconsciously, I don't know, but it was a missed opportunity. I did not comment on it in the book, but yeah, absolutely.
Okay, me neither. I mean, it's the first time that I come across that. So size matters. I mean, in this case.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else, maybe? Well, Sandy, yes.
Hi. Maybe just a quick comment on the presentation and then a question. I think what you were presenting really conveys well the importance of the context where it appears, and like with this, the importance also of having like the sensibility, a keen eye to the streets to actually look for even like these minimalist interventions that are really telling and really convey also powerful messages, not just in an aesthetic way, but also like political messages. And I think you kind of show also this importance of the context, what it's omitted when, for example, in Cordal's case, what is omitted when you put a piece inside the white cube, right? What it loses and what kind of other interpretations can be achieved there or omitted or left out. So the street is left out in this case, right?
Yeah.
But also in a way like how these even like minimalist interventions on the street then convey or the expression on the social media. In a way, what I also find it interesting is on the second part of your presentation, not just this aesthetically pleasing, if you want to call it street art, but also the political interventions, these attacks on the pre-existing expression or visual messages, or this expression of the ones that really have the power or the capital to kind of produce the city, our seascape, what we see in the city. So I think yeah, it's important to look for what is happening on the streets and to see the messages there. But I think like going back to this environmental awareness campaigns, I think it's not just the cities who or these kind of let's say manifestations of power in the streets that recently deserved interventions or attacks. But also, for example, like really one viral or that is being covered recently is the Stop Oil campaigners that are actually intervening into the closed spaces with the medium of street art. So this is like really a strong political gesture that it's also deserving and gaining like a lot of media attention and also attention in the social media. So going now to the question, basically the book was published in 2018, and it's about environmental awareness and the street artists that are doing that, political and this let's call it aesthetic. But also the question of climate change, I think, it's brought and has much bigger significance nowadays. So, do you follow any other, let's say, movements or artists that kind of are conveying street art as a way to express or to raise awareness of this topic?
I mean, I have continued to follow some of the artists that I've presented here, but also others. Cordal right now has a show in Montreal where that is very much focused on the environment and climate change. And of course, it's very topical in Montreal now because of the huge forest fires in Canada that have made Montreal covered in smoke. Basically, it's a very toxic environment to be in at the moment. You already mentioned the anti-oil campaigners that are gluing themselves to paintings and throwing various substances at classic artworks in the museums. And I follow that. I have to say I'm a bit skeptical towards those interventions personally, because I think that they have a tendency they do garner a lot of attention, but I also think that they, just like I was talking about with the example we see here, I think that they probably garner a lot of outrage from the public, and I'm not it remains to be seen, but I think that it might be more counterproductive than productive in terms of actually getting the point across. But at the same time, I do recognize that quiet protests have been going on for decades, and no substantial change has happened. So something radical has to happen. I'm just not sure that this is the right way to do it. But of course, it's easy for me to sit as an academic and say that this is probably not the right way to do it. I have a lot of respect for the people who are actually out there trying to make that change. So I'm very interested to see how that is going to, what kind of effect that's going to have, if it's going to have any substantial effect. I just wanted to go back because you talked a bit about the importance of noticing details in the street, and I just wanted to go back to this example for a moment, the ethical vandalism group in Lund, because this is kind of a deceptive intervention in a way that it looks very simple, but actually this took a lot of work to do, because this is an etching into a hard metal sign. And what you can't see in this photo is that it's placed right outside the central hospital in Lund. And so there are police cars and ambulances driving by there all the time, or at least there was when this intervention was made and this photo was taken. The urban environment there has since been redesigned, and this place actually doesn't exist anymore in that form. But the point I want to make is that in order to make this intervention, the artist actually couldn't make the etching in place. They had to take down a sign and then go to their garage or workshop, and they had to make the etching there and then go and put the sign back. So it wasn't just a matter of rocking up and creating the etching and then leaving. It's very laborious, and it's very noisy to create this kind of etching into a street sign. I also wanted to say in terms of noticing things in the street, that's a very important point for me, that the transformative effect that it can have when you start noticing these interventions in the street, whether it be in relation to environmental issues or whether it just be in relation to exploring our urban space and taking ownership of it. I think that it can be very important when you start, when your eyes start to open to these kinds of expressions. But of course, your eyes have to open to these expressions. They're all over the place, but a lot of people don't notice them. And that's another strength where I think that social media can play a role, because it can actually help condition people to pay attention to these things. If they see these kinds of interventions in their feeds, they might be more susceptible to then actually pay attention to them when they go out in public space. They might be, but a lot of people will not see these expressions in the street. They will simply walk by them. And so you could say that street expressions and their reproduction on social media have sort of a supplementary role, where the people who see them in the street see them in the street, and the people who don't see them in the street might see them on social media and might then eventually start noticing them in the street. So that's another potential benefit of the recontextualization of these works in social media. But like I said, you know, social media is also problematic for a number of reasons, including the fact that it has a tendency to just level all the content, so all the content has the same level of importance. You also mentioned that this book was written in 2018, and that is correct. It's 5 years old now, and I have to say that what is interesting to me is that when the book came out, it did fairly well. I presented in a few places, and people were interested in the book. But I have to say that in the past year or so, more people have started paying attention to this book than did before, and I think that speaks to the increasing precarity, increasingly precarious situation that we find ourselves in relation to climate change and other types of environmental issues. I also have to say that the book that I've written is relatively positive or optimistic. I personally, over the past 5 years, have gotten a lot less optimistic about our chances to not completely avoid, but perhaps mitigate climate change and the effects that it's going to have. I am very disheartened by the huge forest fires we see. I'm very disheartened by deliberate actions like the blowing up of the dam in Eriksen in Ukraine, which has created an ecocide, an enormous ecological catastrophe, as well as a humanitarian catastrophe. And I think that as long as these things are taking place, as long as the production systems that encourage over consumption and overuse of resources are still in place, street art may have an effect, but I'm becoming less and less convinced that it's going to have a decisive effect, unfortunately, because there are all of these much bigger issues, including conscious decisions to destroy parts of the environment, that just have proportionally just a much bigger effect on the ecosystems that we inhabit. And so I hate to leave on sort of a depressing note, but I personally have become more pessimistic about the future of the planet we inhabit. Are there any other questions, so we don't have to end on that note?
Yes, Sandy has another one.
All right.
Just a quick comment. I'm not sure now with this conclusion of yours if we are to expect the Street Art and Environment Part 2 or not.
I mean, you mean another book?
Yes.
It's not impossible, but it's going to be a little while. I've just finished a book now that is coming out in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. We're in the final design stage now, and it's about graffiti. So it's about actually it's about visual methodology and visual methods, but with graffiti in Malmö as a case. So that's the next book that's coming. And then after that, I'm actually going to leave the field of street art and graffiti for a little while. I'll still be around, but my main research topic is going to be something completely different for the next couple of years, because we got funding to work on a project on arts and health. So how art is being used in the health sector. So I and another professor are conducting a study on that, and that's going to take up my time for the next 2 to 3 years. So if there are going to be any further publications, they're going to be minor ones, because we have to write a book, and that takes a lot of doing. But I wouldn't rule out another book on this topic, or smaller publications, perhaps. There's something to be said for writing books, but there's also something to be said for writing shorter publications. For any academics here, or any aspiring writers, writing in a shorter format can really help increase your readership, because it's much easier to take in an article that is 10 pages than it is to sit down with a book that is 120 pages or 200 pages. In this Twitter world that we live in, as some would say, shorter formats can sometimes be more beneficial. Yeah.
So if there aren't any other questions left, I would like to thank you, Peter, again, and I'm sorry again for the mistake at the beginning.
No problem. It happened. You would be surprised how often I get emails for this guy. We have the same name, and we're the same age. I think we're even born in the same month. I'm not 100% sure about that, but we get each other's emails quite frequently, and or at least I get his. And there's no problem whatsoever. He's a very talented guy, so I'm flattered.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. This was Peter Bengtsen. Thank you, Peter, and see you at some other conference, maybe. Goodbye. Okay, so this was our first panel. We are, as we saw, it is quite impossible to separate street art from the activism. We can even say that one of the first Slovenian graffiti art was actually activist graffiti. It was anti-war graffiti from the Second World War that somewhere you can even still see today. They were painted with motor oil or animal blood. But while talking about animal blood, we can try to avoid that, at least if we are talking about food. So we are going to talk about outreach of vegan activism through visual interventions in public space. Isabel Carrasco Castro is preparing us this panel, and I hope I'm getting this one right. She is the president of INDAGUE, Spanish Association of Researchers and Diffusers of Graffiti and Street Art. Welcome.
If you Google my name and then you add graffiti, apparently there is an Isabel Carrasco who was the mother of a graffiti writer who was killed. So, I got a lot of confusion about my name as well. Okay. Oop, you're very tall. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, thank you very much. Let me see how I can. Well, thank you, the organization, for accepting my proposal. It's very exciting to be here. Thank you for those who are staying here. Thank you for those who are following online.
And well, I'd like to start by saying that John Peters is my colleague who has been working with me in this project. He is the responsible for much of the theoretical introduction and the data for this study, yet here I'm on my own, but I think that's important to notice. And well, ecologists and vegans both care about the planet, but they do with a different agenda that sometimes seems to collide. However, for some vegans, the two causes are part of the same ideology and cannot be separated. And that is the case of the two activist artists that I'm presenting today. The first one is Cambia el Statu Quo from Argentina. I'm going to refer to that person as Cambia because it's shorter. And the other person is Math from Spain. And they intervene in public space with small-scale unsanctioned murals. Well, let's start defining what veganism is, okay? Because as many of you may know, it's more than choosing tofu over meat, for example. Okay, sorry, I'm seeing a message here that the Zoom meeting is finished. Now this is shall I just ignore it? Or? Okay. So veganism is a social justice movement, very important, that emphasizes the importance of avoiding unnecessary harm to all sentient beings, humans or otherwise. And that includes avoiding, to the extent possible, because we are not in a vegan world, sometimes it's difficult to avoid, unnecessary consumption or exploitation of animals for any purpose, and therefore against discrimination, exploitation, oppression, etc. So, as you can see, it is more than a diet. It is a political position that emphasizes peace and compassion towards animals, including humans. I am very aware that we humans are animals as well, but for the sake of communication, to make it easier, I am going to use the two words, animals and humans. The three main arguments for veganism are health, environment, and ethics, being ethics the most important one. Regarding the environmental one, science has provided irrefutable data about the impact of animal fishing and agriculture on climate change. And today we all know that meat and dairy industry are one of the most polluting activities. With that information, veganism tends to be skeptical with sustainability agendas that don't include measures for the significant reduction of animal products. And this is one of the reasons why many activists, including the ones that I'm presenting here today, tend to focus on meat industry and food consumption in their outreach campaigns. This is a graffiti by Cambia that illustrates that idea. Okay? It says, if you eat animals, you cannot, underlined, complain about climate change. Now, as I said, the base of veganism is ethics. And that implies the respect for the other animals because they have their own purpose and their own interest, which is pretty much avoiding pain, avoiding being killed, and enjoying their own lives. The philosophical and ideological ground of this idea is anti-speciesism. Speciesism is prejudice or discrimination on the grounds of species. For example, this penguin, regarding global warming, is legitimately wondering, who cares about me? Because very often we care about our planet, bearing in mind our own benefits for our future and our future humans. And that is very anthropocentric, is very human-centered, and it's indeed connected to the concept of speciesism. Speciesism shares similarities with other oppressions in which a predominant group assumes higher moral status in comparison to the others. Veganism is, or at least should be, intersectional. And this diagram is showing the structure of discrimination, including animals, as another alterity. And as you can see, inside the section of non-human animals, there is like a hierarchy, because of course we love companion animals, we love our dogs, we are okay about wild animals, and we don't see, ignore, or kill farm animals, okay? So there is like a progression. Well, in that sense, these so-called farm animals have been proved to behave like companion animals if the situation is provided. They like playing, they like being cuddled, okay? So they can behave as our dogs. Here, Math is drawing this image of a dog and a pig reproducing the same posture, so that we, the viewers, can see them and consider them equally. Okay? And it's interesting because someone wrote like a kind of vandal writing saying, "I love you," over the two drawings, and maybe unintentionally that person is reinforcing the idea of loving the two animals in the same way. Like any other form of discrimination, speciesism is integrated and subtly normalized and promoted in visual culture. In art history, in cartoons, toys, and in advertising. So in short, speciesist structural domination is justified for cultural, social, economic, and moral reasons, and it operates with the strategies of concealment and disconnection. Some of these facilitators of the emotional detachment between the animal and the animal as a product are language, with the use of opaque words such as hamburger, sirloin, sausage, in which the reference animal has disappeared. This is a concept popularized by Carol Adams, is the idea of the absent referenced. 2, strategic ignorance or empathy avoidance, when we simply don't want to see. 3, the production of invisibility, for example, hiding or disguising images from slaughterhouses, or with the fabrication of myths that, after being repeated multiple times, become a kind of dogma or a truth. Like, for example, we need animals' proteins, or we need to drink milk for your bones, or pigs are dirty, or things like this. And of course, visual representation is another facilitator of this detachment. As Molly said in Popular Media and Animals, I quote, "Animal representations are never neutral, and the reification of bodies allows the emotional disconnection to ultimately facilitate oppression." And that is the reason why visual art can be very powerful for this cause, because it can both use and challenge those representation strategies to unveil speciesism. And as Peter Bengtsen was saying, this is particularly important when it happens in public space, when it's perceived as unsanctioned, therefore open to participation and ephemeral. Well, let's see some examples. In what follows, Cambia addresses some cruelties of the meat industry, like confinement in small cages, in small spaces, transportation without water. Basically, in farms, animals cannot do anything that is natural or important for them, physically or mentally. And they are bred to grow so fast that causes injuries, sickness, constant pain, and they are treated as raw material. So this is a conversation between a chicken and a hen, and they say, "I won't be able to save you, son. Mom, where are we being taken?" This one is a pig speaking. It says, "If the meat was tender, it was a baby." So this is a reflection about those animals that are eaten only few months after birth. This cow is wondering where her calf is. Well, dairy cows don't exist. They produce milk for their offspring, so they need to be perpetually pregnant and separated from their calves to satisfy the dairy industry. And this causes profound distress to them both. So this is why she's wondering where my baby is. And "My mother couldn't move." This reveals the cruelty of sows that are encased in gestation crates, and they can hardly move, and thus they cannot have any contact with their offspring. So Cambia takes some strategies from popular culture in the representation of animals. We can see that even in the style, which is like graffiti or cartoons with an outline and then filling with color. In popular culture, animals are usually represented in an anthropomorphic way, and they are more or less humanized in that they are dealing with human lifestyles. In the article, The Peppa Pig Paradox, and the paradox here is being able to watch Peppa Pig or play with a Peppa Pig toy while eating a bacon, for example. Okay? So that is the paradox. Corinne Bocuse argues that what makes us or children identify with Peppa Pig as a character is in fact that human endowment. Okay? So representations like that makes it very difficult to connect to the animal that they represent, because we only connect to the human dimension of those characters. So activists can use that strategy to reverse it, okay, to reverse the discourse. And in the case of Cambia, Cambia appropriates the strategy to provoke an emotional touch, touching upon like motherhood worries or speaking about animals as babies and things like that. So here the identification is intended to provoke empathy and compassion, and it breaks the illusion of representation, building a bridge towards the reality of those animals that are represented, making us question the system. Cambia also makes animals speak, which is another typical thing of popular culture. But in this case, animals confront the viewer. The viewer is very likely someone who participates in their exploitation, okay? And they ask for help in a very raw and direct way, right? Like, I want to live. We cannot liberate ourselves. Or you can eat something else. I don't have anything else. I just have my life. So this point of making animals speak is interesting because the lack of verbal response, the lack of logos, therefore the lack of reason, has been traditionally used in philosophy as the main argument for the moral inferiority of animals. Already in late 18th century, Bentham wrote, I quote, "The question is not, can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer?" And that concept of sentience, the idea of feeling, was further developed in the 20th century by many philosophers, including probably the most important one, Peter Singer. In the 1970s, post-structuralism, and I'm talking particularly about Derrida here, questioned the role of logocentrism, and those theories contributed to the deconstruction of discourses, and thus the review of human practice, art history, etc. Like, for example, from a feminist point of view, queer, post-colonialist, etc. These conceptual frames provided us with lens to detect hiding privilege and oppression. Nevertheless, the case of anti-speciesism hasn't been so successful or diffused, despite the amount of literature and the fact that Derrida himself spoke about the urge to develop more ethical relationships with the other animals. Furthermore, while there is a social consensus about other forms of discrimination, the oppression against animals remains an invisible cause. Let's see now some examples by Math. He's used in a very different style, but touches upon similar subjects. This is, here Matt is representing a group of sheep, and on the Instagram post, Matt included the entry of the word lamb in Wikipedia, in which Wikipedia describes in a very aseptic way that a lamb is an animal that is eaten before the first year of life. This one is entitled New Pizza Place in the Center, and the mural imitates a restaurant advertisement, and it says, "Feel like having a pizza? Ingredients of your choice." The idea of choice, again, is very important. And it says the choices are vegan or normal with babies. Okay? So here you can see pieces of humans that we assume are baby humans on the pizza where we are used to see animals, or better, we don't see animals anymore, okay, because of that dissociation. And this is interesting because this work also questions the idea of normativity, because it's saying that the normal option in this case is the one with meat, therefore with human flesh in this case. Here, Math depicts a sow who is feeding a pig, her piglets. They are outside of a crate, so they can move more or less in a free way. However, her posture resonates with female reclining nudes in art history. Carol Adams, in her groundbreaking book, The Sexual Politics of Meat, can help us understand that association, because she discussed how the mechanisms of objectivization, sexualization, and commodification of female and animal bodies are using the same mechanisms and follow the same logic. Following that idea, here Math is representing a plane and a track, and they are represented as industrial meat cuts. And there are two prompts that we can get out of these murals. One is the idea of reducing animals' bodies to separate isolated sections to see them as flesh, meat, or objects to be consumed, a strategy largely used by, with female bodies in advertisement. And the second one is the perception of the animal body as a machine, as a vehicle, or as a producer, which is typical of the language of the industry, speaking about animals in terms of machine, production, efficiency, etc. That idea of the animal machine was already developed by Descartes in the 17th century. Here, Math draws pigs on the wall of a former slaughterhouse. And meat industry usually marks animals for identification with branding iron or with ear tags. And this is done to indicate ownership and to track the product. In this case, Math is naming them. Naming is a symbolic operation that individualizes beings and establishes the limits, the boundary between animals with whom we have an affective relationship. We name our companion animals, and those animals are approached by number, kilos, or heads in an impersonal way. So Cambia is more direct and appeals to our emotions, while Math is more conceptual and appeals to our intellect, but both of them use figurative representations to target our cognitive dissonance. Representative images have been proved to be more persuasive than abstract ones than other type of messages. Like, for example, the ubiquitous graffiti, "Go Vegan," that I love seeing, okay? But I understand that maybe that is intended for the vegan community. And that is another point that Peter Bengtsen noted already. When we see graffiti or things that people perceived as vandalism, that might be an obstacle to get to the message. So visual activism for animal rights in public space takes multiple forms, from graffiti to stickers, performance. I'm sure you are all familiar with that track that Banksy made circulate in New York. For example, that was a performance, or the display of graphic footings from farmers. So they are all valid because we are all diverse, and we are sensitive and responsive to different types of mediums and messages. And like any other type of street art, these artworks, when they are posted on Instagram, their outreaching power also amplifies, triggering conversations and arriving to larger audiences. So I am finishing. This is a surrealist mural by Math, and here he's depicting a person watering a fish, thus revealing the absurdity of some human interventions both on nature and on others' individuals' lives. Apparently, according to the mural, fishes have been taken out from their natural habitat, and they are grown probably consuming a lot of resources, like wasting a lot of water. In the title, math refers to policies that work as interim arrangements so that the system can go on, instead of discussing and implementing drastic solutions for the current climate emergency. I believe that these works by Math and Cambia are powerful, so I don't know if they can be so efficient, after the last words by Peter, but I think they can at least make us question the system. And as Cambia proposes, we can ask ourselves, what have we done today to stop the collapse? So anthropocentrism has taken us to the point where we are now, for better or worse, and we must find solutions bearing in mind all the other sentient animals who also have the right to live on this planet. Sustainability must be compassionate and think of us as animals with the moral duties of caring and respecting the other non-human animals. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Maybe some questions from the audience?
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I have actually two questions. As you mentioned, for example, in this image here, the animals have an anthropomorphic form, but they are also somehow depicted as childish and maybe even naive. So what do you think, what is the effect of this choice, artistic choice to the communication process of the message? And second is, I noticed a lot of works from Cordoba in Argentina. Are these artists, individual artists acting autonomously or part of some political movements, activist movements? Thank you.
Okay, so the case of Cambia el Status Quo, this person lives in Cordoba in Argentina, so I guess it's easier for that person to just go out in the city where they live. And I know it was part of Boycott, which is this political and anti-speciesist and ecologist movement, but I think now this person is going on its own. And I think this person started with paste taps. I don't know if you're familiar with this group, Boycott. They started in Argentina, but it's transnational. And in many places, at least in Europe, I have seen that they are pasting posters with similar typography. They have a lot of material that you can download. And you can organize your own group in your own city and simply print everything and go out in the streets. So that person was part of that group. It's a group of graphic designers and publicists and artists who are designing those paste taps. Since the pandemic, this person found that decided to go on their own and decided that it was a little bit hard during the pandemic to go out with the rolled posters and the glue and everything, and simply decided to start drawing and painting, because it only requires, like a couple of bottle of paints and one brush, and it found it more convenient. Math is in Galicia, in Spain, and is working totally on his own. And regarding the style, maybe I didn't have the time enough, to develop that in the article. I hope to develop that further. I think one reason to choose this style is simply the fact that this is made without permission. It's unsanctioned, so you need to be fast. So there is that idea of being practical. Okay, there is no a deep explanation. But also my perception is that Cambia is taking advantage of that type of representation of animals that we are used to. We are used to see pigs in this way, like Peppa Pig, like standing on 2 feet and very childish and like toys and so on. So we are used to that. We know how to love our stuffed animals, The problem is that we don't connect to the real animal that they represent. And I think what this person is doing is to use the same kind of representation so that we can connect and see, oh, this pig is so cute, I love it. But then the message is the one that is breaking that illusion of the representation. Is like, oh my God, so this pig is suffering and has a miserable life, not like Peppa Pig. So I think it's like reversing that idea, but taking advantage of it at the same time, because we are used to see animals in this way. I don't know if I answered your question. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a short, quick question about the methodology that was used. Here we've seen the photos, so how you're doing the fieldwork, and it's all the pictures, if I'm not mistaken, it's in Castilian Spanish. So do you also follow other such interventions around?
So the ones in Argentina, I've never seen them in person. So it's a person that I follow on Instagram, and I'm in contact with that person for my research. Okay, so I never saw any of these murals alive. Regarding math, I have seen some of his murals in Madrid and in other cities. He's in Galicia, so he works pretty much in Galicia, which is the north of Spain. And we are in contact as well, you know, on the telephone, virtually. In the case of Cambia, I think the messages are very straightforward. There is little interpretation, little room for interpretation. In the case of math, my comments are my own interpretation. I think some of them are more clear than others, but all of them are quite open, because I think math has a more conceptual style. And in fact, every time I try to check, what do you mean by this? Why did you choose that color? Why did you, this person speaks in terms of, well, I have a lot of influence from graphic novels or from comics, graffiti, because he started as a graffiti writer, in fact. But he never wants to talk about the actual meaning of his murals. Everything is quite open. And sometimes when I see like, oh, this is actually a reference to Carol Adams, like, it wasn't intended, but this is what I like about my murals, you know, that they are very open. And sometimes he sees meaning behind his murals after 3 years, you know, of completion. It's like, oh, so now I understand that I was trying to say this and that. So I think I can understand what everything comes from because of the base of anti-speciesism, which is that shared philosophy and ethos. And based on that, I have been interpreting Matt's murals using that like conceptual frame, but it's all my own interpretation. And of course, maybe some of you saw something different, you know, on the murals.
Any other questions, maybe? Otherwise, I wanted to ask you whether you think the effect would be the same if they would use, for example, the pics we usually see in front of the meat shops, which are the absurd images of pigs that are happy they're going to be cut into pieces.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think that's a good question.
Because these are all sad animals or very serious.
And I guess the location of these murals, it's conditioned also by the fact that they are murals, and you need to find a good spot for the painting. But I know that at least Cambia is also doing more direct activist targeting, like butcheries and supermarkets and things like that. But for that purpose, this person is not using murals. It's using like advertising strategies, intervening on McDonald's and hamburgers advertisement, or putting like stickers on meat products inside the supermarket in the butchery section, saying, for example, this product contains animal exploitation, or this is someone, not something, or things like that. Okay, so I had to choose something, and I decided to focus for this article on this figurative, maybe not so site-specific type of intervention, but I think it would certainly benefit from being closer to the supermarket, because maybe you feel a little bit like, oh my God, I don't feel like choosing the hamburger today, I'm gonna choose tofu. Maybe on the following day you get the hamburger as well, you know, again. But yeah, it would certainly, I think, benefit from that. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, Isabel, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your questions.
And now we are moving to Italy. We are going to hear more about Parco dei Murales in Naples, which TripAdvisor says you need to take at least 1 to 2 hours to walk around if you want to see it whole. We're going to hear more about it from Cultural Assistant for Inward National Observatory on Urban Creativity, Monica Mongelli.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm very glad to be here. So I'm Monica Mongelli, cultural operator for Inward, and so Inward is a national observatory on urban creativity that deals with research and development of urban creativity and operate through an urban creativity enhancement national model divided into 4 quadrants, which was presented in 2011 during the General Assembly on Urban Creativity at the presidency of the Italian Council of Ministers. And so, starting from the directives of research and development, it is divided, as you can see, in 4 quadrants: public, private, no-profit, and international. And each sector is again divided in other segments that correspond to platforms, projects, and initiatives. But in this case, we will focus on the non-profit sector to analyze a specific project, Parco dei Murales, as an example of operation and application. So in 2015, Inward started the Parco dei Murales, a program of artistic redevelopment, social regeneration, and reputational promotion in the Ponticelli district on the eastern outskirts of Naples. But before analyzing it deeply, it's important to provide a piece of information about the context of Ponticelli. So the conurbation of Naples is usually discontinuous and fragmented, constantly crossed by some sort of phenomenon like segmentation, degradation of the collective spaces, and also disintegration of the environmental system. Particularly Ponticelli, the district that forms with the other district of Barra and San Giovanni Teduccio, the 6th municipality of the great city of Naples, lies less than kilometers from the city center, and it hosts about 70,000 inhabitants because it has been identified as one of the areas in Neapolitan territory with the most urgent housing problems. And also, it has emerged by many researchers that it is the demographically youngest area with the highest rate of non-completion of the lower secondary school cycle. Moreover, the gravest figure is linked also to the problem and economic hardship in which the family of children and adolescents of the area live. And of course, there are some problems in the area with Camorra and also the occupation of social housing complex. So the program of Parco dei Murales was implemented following a model divided into 3 sectors: art field, social field, and empowerment field. So during the years, Inward has observed that was necessary an artistic action on the territory because of the absence space for aggregation and the difficulty to reach places dedicated to recreational activities. In the context, the social action was crucial as well, because the community, usually repulsive and unwilling to participate, would have more easily received external stimuli for the creation of a place that is aesthetically, ethically, and socially more human. And equally, an empowerment action has been activated in order to gradually reconstruct the territorial identity and to improve the perception of the neighborhood. But breaking down the model, it can be seen that each field corresponds to the need for a specific objective. So going down to each sector, we'll see artistic development, social regeneration, and reputational promotion. And to achieve the individual objectives, we need specific tools. the use of the tools, the achievement of the relative objectives, and the satisfaction of the need of the corresponding field are actions that produce and deposit tangible results in the territory and intangible ones in the community. And if the result, and above all, or the effects are positive, then we'll ask ourselves how to sustain them over time and sustainability. So which tools have enabled the objectives of the single areas to the model to be achieved? So here is a sequence of artwork that represent the series of pics that represent the artwork created by the artist, and of course the topic that is developed in the artwork. So we have the artist Jorit and the artwork called Aere tutto uguale son le creature. You can see that each title is Neapolitan. And also, I will go fast, we have Z1 with the work A Paziale mani creature, that this work represents the importance, the right to play, and also the quality of it. We go also with Mattia Campodall'Orto that created Lo Trattenimento de Piccirilli, that represents the theme of the power of reading that generates fantasy and helps to see in a different ways the realities. We will go also with La Filiberta that created a gift to the theme of maternity with A Mamme tutte mamme. Also Daniele Nitti with Io sto vicino a te, that represent the theme of solidarity and also sharing. And also Roschellost created the duo of the south of Italy, created Che ha voluto bene non si scorda, that represent these two children that are looking to the ball as an object of veneration and represent the passion for football that unites all the members of a community. And then we have Fabio Petani that created O Sciore più felice, that these are work that represent the importance and the knowledge of the territory. And the last is Zeus 40 that created Cure Paure, an artwork that is a sort, can be represented and means an invitation to the community to take care of what have been created together. So, regarding the social field, we can say that the tools that generated that has been achieved through the organization of workshops and activities of different nature. So from 2015 to 2018, 6 yearly workshops and more than 20 activities were activated, involving numerous children and adolescents. The participation in a process that has been internally defined as participatory curatorship and the decline of do-it-yourself process in which the user feels capable of contributing to the change of what surrounds him through a practical experience. And several workshops were held not only in connection with the artwork, but also concerning other areas such as breakdance, rap, juggling, and theater. And this allowed the involvement of the community using different approach and guaranteed a new positive evaluation free time. In fact, you can see here in the picture some of the activities and workshops. Regarding the empowerment field, the tools used to structure our reputational promotion were media and tours, and using an approach that would allow the dissemination and the knowledge of the park inwards with tours and outwards with media, film, sets, and press release. The visitors of the tours came from all over Italy and often from abroad and are mostly made up of researchers, undergraduate, postgraduate, and experts. And the project has also attracted the attention of national TV and film companies who have chosen some places in the park as set as location to record some scenes of a well-known and famous TV series in Italy, and also to record some scene for video clips, musical video clips in which sometimes happened that the inhabitants of the park appear in some scenes. So, and this is a gallery of an example of media and tour. And of course, the dissemination, the scientific dissemination through conference and participation. So at the end of the program, what tangible results on the territory and intangible results for the community have been achieved? So, regarding the art field, the results are from 0 to 8 big artworks created by 8 important urban artists, introduction of color into an initially gray residential complex in common places, and Parco de Murales effectively became a new place of cultural and artistic, artistic interest located in an area when even basic services are missing. And this is fundamental also to allow the gradual growth of a new contemporary urban artistic heritage in the neighborhood, characterized not only by archaeological sites, but also by mural inventation that destined to be lived daily by present and future communities, and new desire for knowledge of the residents. Regarding the social field, the results are from 0 to numerous playful creative activities for young people, a creation of a new sociality inside the parco and welcoming of those outside. So there's the breaking down on the physical gates that delimits the park, the residential park. And from a previous derogatory name to the new positive name of Parco de Murales. And this, in fact, means achieving a new reason for its territory to be proud, also because some people living in the park currently identify themselves as inhabitants of the Parco de Murales. And this new strengthened identification within the parco demonstrate a sort of pride and reward connection to the territory. In this case, in the power and field, we have achieved from 0 to a consistent number of articles, social media posts, TV news, video clips, and film productions about the parco, from 0 to innumerable tourists and visitors of the parco, also through agencies, and also a special local distinctiveness and a new territorial identity at the national level. So, if the tangible results on the territory and the intangible results for the community just described are positive and can be considered values, how can we keep them over time and space, and how are they sustainable? So, have you finished the surface available within the parco to create new murals? The perspective in the future is to design them on the buildings and the adjacent spaces, and an extension that inhabitants will appreciate and see as a continuation of their good practice and good example. Participation in public or private call regarding art and culture will be able to implement elements of furniture and service designed by artists in the space of the parco, and the writing of a book in the next year about the Parco de Murales with the best artistic explanation of the 8 works that will be donated to all the inhabitants will be a further guarantee of preserving its values over the time. These are 2 pics to example of new mural artwork created near the parco. And in fact, this is a tangible sign because these 2 murals were created not only directly by the local artists, but also directly requested by the community. And so these artworks have given the push to form a proper urban creativity system, district, that goes beyond the perimeter of the residential park and also the physical gate. Regarding the social field, the creation by the municipality of the desired football pitch following the thematic mural has shaken the stasis of the residents by making them create new spaces, such as a social garden, and this momentum must be seized and accompanied as to guarantee the spirit of initiatives. And for 5 years now, the press has continued to refer to the parco with a positive way, so this means also, that could mean a stability in the perception of the parco by the tourist. And on the basis of this new sociality, in the future, it will be possible to host probably many new events and projects. This, in fact, is the picture that represents the changing in the internal space of the parco before and after the football pitch. In fact, as you can see, before the creation of the proper football pitch, that space of concrete were used by the children to play football. And so the object of veneration was exactly like this. And this is the social garden initiative of the inhabitants of the parco that created after. Regarding the empowerment field, the tours have given the parco a vast audience and its community the opportunity to open up to others, with hospitality and sociability. And these values have been made sustainable by joining a tourist service app at one-off cost. That is attracting many people. In particular, the decision to make list videos has attracted national TV, which has given, of course, visibility. And the decision to stabilize the tour in a free-form training for young people in the civil service program a year at our organization is a choice that has made the provision of guided tours completely sustainable in favor of the values that it allows. And in fact, this is the ET Guides, the tourist service app, and also a frame from a video of this video. And these are some groups of volunteers of the Universal Civil Service through the years, and also some volunteers that are conducting free tours. So, in conclusion, in the light of what has been said, it is evident that the development of the urban creativity program, which can be expressed through a balanced model divided into art, social, and empowerment field, and which starts from the analysis of the needs of the inhabitants and is articulated through the realization of specific objectives such as artistic development, social regeneration, and reputational promotion, has been positive in producing tangible results on the territory and intangible results for the community. And that can be considered values which, thanks to the operation described, have been supported and guaranteed in space and time. And for this reason, the program thus composed is exportable. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you for the presentation. Any questions, maybe? Yes.
Well, I have 3 questions, in fact. One is, maybe you mentioned that, but I wasn't very sure if I got it. So, how does the community participate in the mural subjects? That I think is what's the second part. Then, if there is any kind of interaction between the artists of the murals and the community, like, for example, where are they staying during the week or 2 or whatever they need to complete the murals, if they are staying with the community, if they are in a hotel in the city center, if they interact or no. And finally, if there is any concern about gentrification in the area with the project, or if it's not the case.
It's absolutely not the case already. Regarding the first part of your question, yes, the tools utilized in the art field was exactly the presence of the artist, so not just the artists that create the work and go away, but the presence of the artist and the continual communication with the communities. And for this reason, also to facilitate the communication between artists and communities have been chosen just Italian artists. And also the theme and the specific aspect of the theme to be depicted on the wall emerged exactly from a confrontation between artists and children and adolescents of the park. It's important to underline that every time the artists always kept their style and their decision, so they were able to external and to take the output of the confrontation with children and the social values of this confrontation to be depicted on the wall, but they remain faithful to their own stylistic style. And in some ways, intended to transfer the tools to the children to comprehend what the artists created. And so even if there were many confrontation about the sketch about of their artworks, of course, the last decision and the last work was always on the artist. And of course, during the realization of the artwork, the confrontation between artist and community was continual, because children not just participated with the artist at the workshop, but also participated in created the artwork with very brief and short contribution, just painted somewhere and helping the artists doing something, but they be involved in the curatorship of the artwork.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next one. The next panel will be online because we are so sustainable that we didn't brought all the guests here. So we are going to hear about a wall, the ever-evolving relationship between street art and sustainability in Hermopolis, which is a small, well, not that small Greek island located just west of Mykonos. And we are going to hear that from Paris Xintarianos, Tsitopinas, and Spiros Bofilatos. I hope both of them will be joining us soon because, you know, we never know how the internet works. But I see we got them online already. Spiros, hello. Can you hear us?
Yes, loud and clear. Hello.
Great. We have both of you here. Very nice to have you. The microphone is yours. If you'll be maybe a minute shorter than announced, it will be no problem. Here you go.
Yeah, just is everything okay? See the screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, hello, and pleasure to see all of you. Sorry for not being able to make it in person, but some things have come up, as they tend to do. Let me introduce the team. So it's a two-people operation, me, Spiros Bofilatos, and my dear friend and colleague, Paris Xintarianos, who is also online. Started from Greece, the island of Syros. I'm currently in a very grey and rainy London in the Royal College of Arts. And the work that we will be presenting and talking about today is a continuation of a collaboration that has been going between me and Paris for almost a decade. And we're going to talk about a very specific wall and try to untangle what this means for the work that we've been doing in the past years. So I'm going to start with our geographical and spatial context. So we are both, well, we used to be both based on the island of Syros in Greece, in the Cyclades. The Cyclades is a collection of many islands in the middle of the Aegean Sea. Syros is a very interesting setting to do this type of work because it has many layers of culture, many layers of history. It is one of the first places in the European continent to be inhabited almost 5,500 years before Christ. It's gone through many cultural changes, spanning from ancient Greek, Roman times, being a part of the Venetian sphere of influence during the Middle Ages, to trading and collaborating with the Ottoman Empire, to modern Greece. And more specifically, Hermopolis, the capital city of Syros and the Cyclades, is a result of internal migration that happened through the Greek Revolution of 1821. So when the revolution started, many islands that were inhabited by Greek-speaking people at the time were targeted by the Ottoman Empire as punishment for the revolution, and many rich and not rich people got to travel to Syros because it was under Venetian occupation, so it was kind of a safe haven, and they created the city of Hermopolis, which is kind of a neoclassical, neo-romantic inspired architectural wonder in the middle of a very the traditional kind of stereotypical Greek Cycladic white houses with blue windows, etc. So it's quite an interesting place. In the past, we have kind of navigated the idea of heritage and ways of creating and managing cultural identity and cultural heritage as it pertains to street art specifically. So we have been studying how do we build those local and national narratives around our cultural heritage? How do we choose who chooses, and what are the values that we select for today looking at the past? So what do we choose about our past, our history, our culture, and how do we bring it to today? How do we create new value? And this is a very thorny issue because obviously those tend to be very um, adversarial narratives, and many times I call it gentrification, but there are other words as well. But we tend to have those kind of created narratives around our culture and heritage, and many things are left behind. So in the past, we have discussed about 4 types of cultural appropriation, and how this, historical document is built around different models. So, for example, cultural dominance is the type of one authored narrative that comes. So it's very much driven by local powers and has a specific goal. Cultural exploitation is something that we see very much in Greece, where elements of counterculture are kind of dominated by a dominant narrative, and we tend to create those, in the context of Greece and the Cyclades, almost touristic narratives, where we built this amusement park based on history, where people can come and experience whatever they've been told is important experience, part of ancient Greek or Roman culture. But at the same time, we have those kind of alternative models of cultural exchange, where it's a more multi-authored model of creating a heritage and cultural capital, and transculturation. Sorry, that's a hard word. Where cultural elements from multiple cultures. So, for example, us being in the Balkans, being in the middle of the Aegean Sea, we exist in this crossroad where the East meets the West, Asia meets Africa and Europe, and we're both, as Greeks, been the colonizers and the colonists in different types of history. So this layered, multi-authored, open approach to heritage and what it means. So this is kind of the background of what we've been talking about, but this time we selected a very, very narrow perspective to understand and to talk about these ideas, and we picked one wall. We picked one wall that we consider to be very important because it is centrally located in the city of Hermopolis. It's kind of a point of reference for everyone in the city. It is a very important border in the sense that it separates the city from the industrial shipyard Neorio, which you see here. So this is the wall that we're looking at. And it's also a border between the upper class, kind of rich parts of the city to the northeast, and the more working class neighborhoods of people who used to work in the factories in Syros and now work in Neorio, that kind of live more to the east, to the west. Sorry. So it's a very interesting wall that has kind of been a touch point that has been authored by different people in different times. And in this work, we're kind of trying to have a micro lens of looking at this wall and the last 50 years of Greek history, and more specifically the history of Syros as it has been witnessed by us. And I think through this perspective, we're kind of trying to see if our main research questions that we've been dealing with in the past actually apply in this kind of more specific case study. So a very quick timeline. So we look at crises as those kind of points in time that tend to change things, as points in time that foster the creation of well, art, in our case, of street art, of protest. And frankly, it's been probably way too many for us Greeks. So the four kind of crises through which we're going to be looking at this wall is the 1981 oil crisis and inflation crisis, which led to the rise of the Pan-Hellenic socialist movement, also known as PASOK, which is kind of a very interesting time in Greek history. Again, context, 10 years before that, we see the fall of the military junta that was ruling Greece for the for 7 years, and before that, a civil war between monarchists and communists that kind of ravaged the country after the end of World War II. Then we kind of fast forward to the next crisis, that of 2009, the Greek riots of 2009, following the murder of 15-year-old Alexandros Grigoropoulos by policeman Epaminondas Korkoneas on the 6th of December. Riots that lasted more than a month all around the country, kind of pop up, and we have this kind of youth movement of creative destruction, let's call it that. 2007, you might have heard of that, the Greek government, all European government debt crisis, the collapse of banking sector, and I think it's Lehman Brothers. And 2020, yet another crisis. Again, the war in Ukraine, the COVID pandemic, and a whole mess of crises. So let's look at the wall, because that's what we're here to talk about. This is the kind of a viral 1978 protest which says PASOK, save us, PASOK sosemas. And frankly, we have no idea who authored this. We know that this was self-initiated, so we very scientifically note it down as some dude with a brass. And it's kind of this very autonomous and very authentic graffiti that essentially points to this political movement that is happening. It is a time of disillusionment, of despair, but it's also a time of hope. It's the time of hope that socialism and those new kind of models, those, we call them the Scandinavian model of government in Greece, that PASOK brought about, is going to solve all of the problems that were caused because of the global financial crisis at the time. And the context is very specific. I think it's Greece. It's the Greek political system kind of being souped to its core by the rise of this new socialist power. Next up, sorry for the lack of photographs, but getting this presentation was a big struggle for us. So in 2009, the students of the local university, the Department of Product and System Design Engineer, organized a 4-day festival called React Festival, which was focused around understanding how we can move from a society that caused the problems and violence that led to the murder of Grigoropoulos. And the call was an open call for graffiti artists without curation, leading to this multi-authored mural where each author was kind of doing their own thing without really thinking of the overall mural. So it's kind of more a collection of different pieces of art without an overarching element. So it's a very multi-authored, collaborative mural. We position it in the activism and protest typology, and it's kind of refers to the situation in Greece and Europe at the time as you know, the the fires of the crisis were kind of starting to roar. And the main values that the different works embodies: resistance, anger, suspicions against the state, but also this idea that through conviviality, solidarity, and collaboration, we can come up with a new model that we help each other instead of waiting for the state to help us, which is kind of the PASOK model that led to the problems in 2009. In 2017, in the middle of this next crisis, a street art festival was organized. It's still running after 5 years, and here the authorship model is collaborative. So an open brief, an open call for artists was circulated with three main themes around culture, environment, and industrial heritage of Syros. It's collaborative, and the artists kind of work together to create a more holistic mural that kind of appreciated its technique, its person's art, but also had an overall narrative and was touching on values such as the value of respecting the environment, an appreciation of history, the locality, but also a celebration, a very joyful, inclusive event where part of the context is let's have a good time, let's enjoy life, even if the banks are collapsing, we can take care of each other. And the context is quite specific. Syros and the Cyclades, this is less about the Greek context, but it's about how can we create art that embodies those values and those ideas, like the industrial heritage of Syros, or rebetiko, a very important type of music that emerged in Syros and Piraeus at the time, which is a very important chapter in the cultural heritage of the island. The last kind of block is 2020. During the crisis, an American Greek company called Onex buys the shipyard, which was kind of left alone, and most of the people working there were unemployed. And they have a very strong brand, and they develop their brand by commissioning a collection of street artists with a very specific brief to do a mural. In this case, this is a single authored work. It's a part of a brand of a company, and it's a very carefully cultivated image about our history, or our history as the company wants to perceive it as its brand asset, and very specifically and very narrowly around this new company and the industrial heritage of shipbuilding. I could get into it, but I might get sued, but they're kind of, simply put, they don't give a damn about environmental regulation, and because they're big enough, the state is happy to look the other way while they perform sandblasting on huge container ships without any type of protection. And this is in the middle of the city, so everyone gets to breathe it. So yeah, sue me if you want. If you get this, sue me, whatever. I'm not going to be the first one. Yeah, intimidation is kind of a big part of what they're doing. And obviously, you can see anywhere in the Balkans, you have to have a priest if you're doing something which is very close with the state. So yeah. So some very quick conclusions, because I don't want to run over, and frankly, I feel kind of underprepared for this presentation, but it's kind of the things that we're looking to keep developing and have in the paper when this is presented. But walls are amazing. They tell many stories. Some of them are very carefully groomed, and they leave a lot of interesting stuff behind. Others are an authentic cry for expression. It's just people who need to express themselves that don't have any other way to express themselves, and do it on a wall with a spray can. I think you know it better than I do. Authorship, when it comes to these creative works, is kind of a very interesting discussion to have. And in our kind of ongoing dialogue of trying to understand where art, design, and protest kind of happens, and what's the interplay between those three things, I think it's really important, and it really helps us understand the typology of a work by understanding the model of authorship. Is it just some guy trying to do a thing? Is it a company that very carefully cultivate their brand and create a mural? Is it a collective of people who want to celebrate their perception of local heritage and cultural capital? And that is the battlefield. Some voices are trying to express themselves, others are trying to dampen those voices. So the wall is a battlefield. Each layer of paint is a battle, and it's a battle about how do we perceive our culture, our local heritage, our place in democracy even. And finally, a more kind of technical idea is that the documentation and preservation of graffiti and street art, of this very ephemeral type of art, is essential not just for people studying street art and talking about street art like us, but it's a historical document, and it is a historical document that documents the voices of the voiceless. It is a way to preserve those voices of dissent that they don't get to be in the papers or the history books. So we really need to think of how do we keep these historical documents alive in the future. So that was our very brief presentation. We're really looking forward to develop those things, and I'd love to listen to your questions and comments, because that's how we can take this further on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could I maybe just add a few comments? My esteemed colleague had made a great presentation. Although we're struggling with copyright issues with photos and everything with the Neorio company, because it's not only that the movements and actually the legal issues about the wall is a very juicy story, and one that maybe we are going to develop in our paper that's going to come in the next period.
And hopefully we don't get sued for €1 million, because that's the amount 3 people have been sued for, saying, oh, maybe those people are not really following environmental legislation.
Yeah, so it is much more than a wall. This wall is not just a wall. So we'll be very happy if we can also show some pictures if we have the time of our festival, Stray Art Festival, because you can also see the dimensions of the wall and everything. I don't know if we have the time.
Yeah, Sandy, do we have the time? I guess we do have the time, so yes, please show us.
Okay. Can you, Spiros, can you maybe share your screen?
Yeah. Just give me 1 second to get it sorted. Sorry, it's a live show, live shows and technical troubles, right? Yes. No, sorry, wrong screen. Sorry, too many screens. Here we go.
So this was the very, very first Stray Art Festival. You can go down below at the very first photos in 2017. We started this festival at the Neorion Wall. At that time, the company was not running, so we had the opportunity to create our paintings in one of the biggest walls. So this was the remodeling of the wall. They erased everything. This was my piece, Marco Bakaris. So here you can see the old paintings getting ruined. Actually, they didn't even say anything about what they were about to do. They didn't notice us, even if they had all our communications. I mean, emails, telephones, and everything. And if we go a little bit down. You can also check by yourselves if you want. This is the Facebook page of Stray Art Festival. As Spiros said before, we are still running this festival every year in September, and we are trying also to embody the values of heritage, of culture, of Syros and Greece in our festival, and every year we come up with a different topic. So these are the photos of the first Stray Art Festival. So you can see that the wall is huge. It's a very big wall, and it is one of the walls that you can see as soon as you get in the harbor of Hermopolis in Syros.
Can we, is there any questions, or I think we're like okay for time? Sorry.
Are there any questions? Maybe. I was wondering what's going on with the other parts of the wall.
What do you mean with the other parts?
As far as I understood from the map, this is only one part of this wall. You chose it specifically, or you wanted to do the art on the whole area of the wall?
This is the central area of the wall. The other walls are on the sides where there are the entrance. There is the entrance of the shipyards, so we couldn't do murals there. But some people have created graffiti or slogans or other stuff on the other sides of the wall.
Illegally?
Yeah, most of the time, yeah.
Okay. So if we don't have any questions, I would like to thank you guys because we are a little behind our schedule. So thank you very much, and see you again when you put out the results of the lawsuit, right?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Unless we're in jail, that will be hard to do. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
We will continue with another online presentation by Liliana Radošević. She's going to take us back to the times of BC, and by BC I mean before Corona. As you all know, times changed in the meanwhile a little bit, and she will be talking about graffiti and street art archives sustainability pre and post-Corona period. And since she's going to be online, I hope we will deal with that soon. Yeah. In the meanwhile, I can maybe tell you that we have another very nice mural by the coast, by the Slovenian coast, because Vlatko Čančar, who was the first guy from Koper that won NBA ring, just returned this week, and the hooligans, the native hooligans, actually did this great graffiti of him in the port of Luka Koper. So if you'll be there, maybe you can see this. It's very quite big, I think 5 times 3 meters size mural. Mitja Velikonia would maybe tell you a little bit more about it, but I think it's one of the first murals about sportsmen in Slovenia. Okay, this for a short anecdote. I believe we have Liliana now back already. Liliana, hello, can you hear us? Okay, we can't hear you if you are saying anything, maybe. You just... we can see you, but we still can't hear you. Maybe connect the audio. So we will be able to hear you. Maybe the pictures tell us a lot more than 1,000 words, but we would be great to hear you as well. Okay, we hear you now.
I will try to put my earphones on because that was better this morning. Just give me a sec.
Okay, we trust you on that one.
Okay, so how does it sound now?
Is it better? Yeah, maybe tell us something a little bit, please. You have a presentation,
right.
maybe?
Yes, I have presentation, and I will share it immediately so that we can start. Right.
Recording stopped.
Okay, we can hear you now. loud and clear. And now we see your internet page.
Okay, yes, I'm trying to get to my presentation. Just give me a sec. I need, well.
Of course. By the way, Liliana's presentation will be the last one before an hour break. So we'll see you again here when we will project the documentary film, a short documentary film. So I invite you after the break to come in again. Okay, great. We see your presentation now. So Liliana, the stage is
finally.
yours.
Okay, thank you. Right. It's always a little bit tricky with these technical stuff, but yeah, let me start from the scratch. So I'll be talking about archives and how you can sustain archives that deal with graffiti and street art, because that's not a very, very popular thing to do. And let me just move on. Right. So I'm part of a Street Art Belgrade team, and we have been independently doing research about graffiti and street art for more than 20 years. So we have large archives. We want to share them. We want to achieve this goal that we continuously do our research, documentation, and popularization of graffiti and street art. And at the end of this endeavor, we actually want to make a digital institution. So not to have a building where we can store stuff. We don't want to own anything. We actually want to be able to give information and show off our archives in the best possible way so it would be available to everyone. We, of course, do a lot of different things. We have partially this archive, which is still under construction. We have 3D Walls archive, still under construction. We do virtual reality exhibitions. We do 3D prints of street art and graffiti in Belgrade. We also do tours, and we produce books. Our next one hopefully will be done by the end of this year. So when we talk about archives, as I said, these are the things which are usually the basis for any kind of good research if you don't have material evidence that some piece of art existed somewhere. But archives are usually not the most popular ways of presenting culture. So I officially started my research about graffiti and street art in the year 2000. Even before that, I started doing some photographs, and the most important part of my archive from late 1990s and early 2000s is actually still being preserved in the original films that I've kept all these years. And as such, this is the archive that is completely useless because I have it, and if we count my colleagues from Street Art Belgrade who are using it, there may be other 2 persons in Belgrade that know about it and use it. So this is the archive that is pretty much useless, as I said. And my original idea some years ago was to donate my complete archive, both the films and the digital stuff and the books and everything I have on graffiti and street art, to the Museum of Contemporary Arts here in Belgrade. But then I realized that there is no one there who can actually understand and contextualize everything I give them. So therefore, in order to give them an archive, I would have to contextualize everything on my own and then give it to them. And then I was thinking, like, what's the point? I can just do my own archive. On the other hand, my colleague Alexander, who is a photographer, and he's been doing his photographic work on streets also for more than 20 years. And then later on, he concentrated on graffiti and street art. his archive was very available to everyone. So firstly, he made Belgrade Graffiti internet site. And later on, when we merged our two organizations and we became Street Art Belgrade, he made a new one. But then there was, of course, a Facebook page and Instagram page that are still active and that have quite large number of followers. But the problem is he normally has only the name of the author and maybe the area of the city where you can find all of these pieces. So if we think from the academic point of view or from the point of view a little bit more passionate graffiti and street art lovers, you don't really have much to go on. So in order to actually understand most of these things, you really need to give them a context. Without context, I mean, it doesn't really function that well. So recently we started working on our new project, which is called Urban Heritage Hub. And this is an archive that is supposed to have a lot of information about the particular artist and particular art pieces that we can find mostly in Belgrade. And the reason why we're able to give this much information is that Serbia and especially Belgrade have different context than other European cities, and we have the laws, but the laws are not being enforced. So there are no legal consequences for either the artist or for us who give this sort of information. And so, you know, we can do it properly. You know, you can find a lot of info that won't damage anyone. If the laws change, we have to rethink our concept, but for the time being, you know, this is readily available to everyone. And we thought about this concept where we want to have, at least for the beginning stage, 30 artists, and for each artist we would have 3 photos, which will explain different stages of the development of their style. And if you read all of the text that you find on this page, you would be able to understand general history of graffiti and street art in Belgrade. And we also thought about what kind of information we want to give, especially like if you deal with the digital content, you really have to have a critical amount of metadata in order for you to understand what you're actually presenting. So we have 2 sets of metadata. One is dealing with the photography itself. So is it analog photography? Is it digital photography? Like, it makes a lot of a difference if it's my photography from 1990s, which is like really bad photography in general, like in all standards, or is it Alexander's photography from the last year that was done with the best possible camera that you can get, or if we have done anything to fix it in Photoshop. Researchers, this is going to be very critical. On the other hand, we have different set of data that is related to the content of the photography. And this different set of data is telling us more about the artist, about the artwork, and it is here where we try to contextualize a particular artwork and why is it important and so on and so forth. So when I talk about all of these things, it actually sounds a little bit boring. And if you want to apply for any kind of funding for maintenance of your archive, it's going to sound boring to people that don't know anything about it. So it's kind of completely understandable how things are functioning. So pre-corona, we had our own strategy. How can we actually help our archive survive? And how can we kind of be self-sustainable in order to do the research and to fill the archive and to make it available for the future generations to come. So we did a lot of research on how this type of internet sites and archives function in general. So of course there is always a local and international funding, then doing street art tours, then selling some sort of a product that could be useful, and then having an online shop. So when we talk about the local and international project funding, this is very unstable, and most of you who are working with funding, this type of funding, know that you can never count on this kind of thing. So it's always best to have maybe 50% self-sustainable project and then have this funding as an addition for all of these things, than to actually have project funding as your main income. So this was the reason why we really didn't want to count on this source of income. Of course, local funding is very poor, so the money we get is really peanuts. And when it comes to international, more precisely European projects, we have this issue that Serbia, even though it is European country, is not EU. So we don't belong to European Union, so we don't have access to EU funds. We have maybe 2, maybe 3 possibilities where we can apply independently. Otherwise, we need to be part of somebody else's project. We can be partners, but we can't be leaders. So that means we can't develop what we want to develop. We have to adjust to the calls, the way they advertise it. And when it comes to doing street art tours pre-corona, that was actually a trend that was developing faster and faster. So colleague Srđan Tunic and I decided that we want to do these tours as an museum guided tours, because we tend to think of the city as open museum or open gallery where graffiti and street art are supposed to be. We don't really want to intervene with graffiti culture and preserve anything that it's not supposed to be preserved, because it's ephemeral art. So we figured out the best way to preserve all these things is actually by documenting it properly and scanning the walls in 3D format, which you can later on see in virtual reality. So doing street art tours was maybe the most hopeful endeavor. And I even went through a process of getting a tour guide license in Serbia, which was very painful. But I did it, and then somehow, it just didn't work because you have to have the local audience in order to be sustainable. And our local audience really wants to attend free events, which we organize quite often. Then we are budgeted from some other source, and then they come for free. But they don't really want to participate when they need to pay. So. And if Corona taught us everything, it's that you can't really rely on tourist industry to support this form of thing. So then we also thought maybe Alexander can sell some of his prints and photographs that have no street art content, which was a good idea, but again, it didn't work. We tried also to develop online shop with items that pretty much every internet site dealing with this topic has, so like bags, t-shirts, original artist prints and books. Of course, prints would be kind of offered in collaboration with the local artists and so on and so forth. But this pre-corona strategy, as we saw it, was quite complex, and we were willing to make it work. But then suddenly, of course, everything changed, and by kind of closing people for a long, extended period of time, but they were not able to actually walk around and maybe participate in some of our activities, made it kind of almost impossible. And this is the time also in 2019 when we got unexpectedly, well, we were working hard on it, but it was unexpected gain that we got a possibility to make our first virtual reality exhibition. So you can see here a fly through. And for us, it was really amazing because it gave us an opportunity to do something new, something different. We learned quite a lot from it. And actually, in our own cultural context, it was so well perceived that everybody suddenly wanted to collaborate with us. And then we got an opportunity to do a new virtual reality exhibition that had its premiere this spring in Paris. And we presented it at the Serbian Cultural Center, which is just in front of the Pompidou Center. So again, it was perceived much better than we could ever expected. Parallel to this, we also started working on our project that has to do with 3D prints of graffiti in street art. And last year I gave presentation about this project at this very conference, so you can find that one. But just to kind of explain it quickly, we from the very beginning thought that street art and graffiti is the most available form of art and everybody can see it. And then we figured out, well, of course, people who are not in Belgrade can't really see it, so let's make a virtual reality exhibition. And when we finished that one, then we also figured out, well, not everybody can see it still. You know, there are people who don't see in general, so they don't see graffiti and street art, and you know, this is it. So our colleague Jelena suggested that we do these 3D prints of graffiti and street art, and it suddenly became like really popular project. I mean, again, it took us a couple of years to get funding to do it, but after the first prints were posted on the walls, it suddenly became like super popular. And, you know, we now have 9 prints in Belgrade, which makes Belgrade one of the only cities in Europe, maybe even in the world context, that has this amount of graffiti and street art available for the blind and partially sighted people. So this actually led to another development where we've been found and by the Zero Project conference, which is a conference that deals with everything that has to do with inclusion. It happens every year in February in Vienna. And they invited us to present our project and also wanted us to maybe do something in Vienna. So then in collaboration with Kai Libre Festival and Zero Project, we now have 3 prints that you can find in Vienna as well. And here you see the photo of artwork that was happening during this year's Zero Project conference. So we have been invited to produce an art piece during the conference itself, and we invited our colleague and dear friend Jana to do a particular piece for this particular conference, which is not really a street art, it's a regular piece of art that can be transported. You know, it's like a moving mural, but we included this plate for the with the explanation for the blind and partially sighted with 3D print as integral part of the art. And also for the first time, we produced an artwork that already had some 3D prints and 3D elements within the art itself. So I don't know if you can see, but some of the birds in this piece are actually also 3D printed. So this actually changed quite a lot how we see the things. So now when post-corona in 2023, when we think about the possibilities, how we can sustain our project, Urban Heritage Hub, we start seeing that okay, local and international project funding is still something that we need to do, but we apparently need to concentrate more on virtual reality exhibitions and 3D prints, because this is something that apparently became super popular. So the challenge now becomes, how do you transcend all of these ideas that you have had beforehand, so in 2019, 2018, of how we can function and how we can contribute so that we can become self-sustainable and self-sufficient. Because such as it is, like the four of us who work for Street Art Belgrade, we are actually working, like most of us are doing like 3 different jobs because we're all freelancers, and then we work on Street Art Belgrade as, you know, our passion project. We wanted to survive. We wanted this archive and all of this 3D digital information to be available to everyone all the time for free. We don't want to charge for that, but now we are started thinking, so yes, we have new knowledge, we have know-how, so how can we start producing virtual reality exhibitions for others, and how can we start producing 3D prints for other people so that that can become our income, and yet we are still doing something that can boost our knowledge and know-how so that we can do our archive more easily and more sustainably. So yeah, it's we still don't have answer to this question, so I can't tell you how we are going to do this. But at the end of the story, you know, archives are not very popular, and nobody really wants to invest money in it, and nobody wants to support us to do that. But without the archive, process of doing our virtual reality exhibitions is much more complex. So the first one took us 2 years, the second one took us about a year and a half. If we have had our resources, and if we have had our archive the way we wanted it from the very beginning, we probably would have had 60 to 80% of materials already done, which would make this process of doing this colorful things like virtual reality and 3D walls that are very popular much easier for us. So yeah, that would be it for today, guys. And if you want to see any of our projects, you can visit our internet site. Everything's for free. Thank you.
Okay, Liliana, thank you very much. Because we're running behind the schedule, we will skip the questions for this one. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thank you, bye.
So I would like to invite you all to take a short break. We'll meet you back again here at 1 p.m. and 35 minutes. We're not going to have an hour break. We need to start on schedule, so please take a short coffee break and come back here for the screening of documentary Paint to Change. See you soon.